So, can everybody see the screen?
Oh, yes, sir.
Okay, you can see it. Perfect. So, like I said, this is the first of 4 webinars. We're kind of discussing an entire industry, and it's impossible really to do this in any less than about 4 hours worth of content. Now, I used to do this completely backwards. With Government Contracting Academy, I used to take people through the entire program of how to do everything. And then I would say, now let's get started. Well, I look back on that, I'm thinking like, well, Randy, that was kind of stupid, because some of these things, for example, market penetration takes a little bit of time. So what we're doing now is we're trying to get people with their fishing line in the water as soon as possible for those market penetration opportunities, because that takes time. So you can be fishing while you're learning. And I think that's the best way to expedite your success. Now, here, let me get this out of the way. So this right here is the first webinar is defining your company. This right here is the strategy piece of this. And here's the reality. Most startups fail because they get this part wrong. It's where most startups fail. This phase right here. Now, here's the good news. You don't have to be perfect to get started. But in order to be able to grow past market penetration, you got to get this right. There's 2 broad strategies that I discuss. One is what I call the sniper strategy. You've got to know exactly with pinpoint accuracy what you want to do and who you want to do it for. But for market penetration, you can use the shotgun strategy. If it moves, you shoot it. And it's good enough to get your foot in the industry and in order to be able to start to grow. So webinar number 1 is going to be defining your company. Is that business strategy. The second webinar that we're going to be doing next week is we're going to help you position your company to be very attractive to your first customer. And your first customer is not going to be the government. Your first customer is actually going to be a large industry partner who's required to do business with small businesses. Why? Because the small business set-aside program forces them to give 29.43% of their large contract awards to small businesses. And then there's specific set-asides within that 29.43%.
This prime and subprime, that's an elemental deal that's could be worth highlighting.
Oh, that's right, man. Thanks, Jonathan. That because sometimes I talk too quickly. I don't go into the detail that I need to. There's only 2 ways to make a dollar bill in this industry. You can either be a prime contractor where you have the contract with the government, or you can make a dollar bill as a subcontractor. That's where you're supporting a prime contractor. Well, when you're starting out, the only realistic way to get market penetration is as a subcontractor, where you are working with a prime contractor or a prime bidder who's bidding on a prime contract. And you'll want to work with them because they will have the highest probability of success. And then when they win that bid, then they'll give you the subcontract, that teaming agreement that you're going to sign with them. That bid teaming agreement becomes a subcontract. So that is how you're going to find your market penetration, is through a subcontract initially. Now, these large prime contract bidders, again, they have to find specific types of small businesses. And they also have to win the contract. So you give them what they want. You become one of those hard to find small business set-aside types, and you give them corporate credentials that your company has that adds value to their bid effort, that mitigates the risk of you being a small business. Then the next webinar we're going to be talking about is looking legitimate. Your website is your identity when you're starting out. It's where nobody goes to brick and mortar anymore. If the company's researching your business to see if they want to partner with you, they're not looking what your physical address is and going to where that physical address and looking at your building. They don't do that. They're looking at your website. And here's the deal. Your website can look just as professional as IBM's. Why? Because it's coded in HTML, just like every other website. Therefore, there's nothing keeping you back other than effort and know-how of creating a website that looks like every other $500 million company. So that's the goal. Your website, your online identity should look just like every other $500 million a year company. So I say that tongue in cheek, but not really. It can. You can do that. And then the final webinar is massive outreach. So once you've already defined your markets and your business strategy, and you become that hard to find set aside with those corporate credentials that add value to a large business bidder that you ultimately want to seek a subcontract from. And when they go research you, you're looking 100% legitimate, like a very ultra mature small business. Then what you do is you got to tell everybody your good news story. Here, let me start talking about that today, because today we're talking about the strategy, how to take that very first step. So let's get back over here. The very first thing. So again, this is where we are. But the final thing is we're going to be doing massive outreach. So getting started, everybody thinks like, oh my gosh, I need to have a massive business plan. Answer: a business plan is a total waste of effort. Everybody starts with the same thing. Oh, I need a business plan. 99.9% of all small businesses never even refer to their business plan to actually help them with their company. So it's one of those things that you do because you feel like you have to do, but it has no value. The big thing about this is having your mindset in the right place. I love this quote. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie or the musical Hadestown. My kids hated it. I liked it. This is the lyric. I'll tell you where the real road lies. Between your ears, behind your eyes. That is the path to paradise. Likewise, the road to ruin. Basically, what they're talking about, what Hermes is saying, your mindset, the path to paradise or it's the road to ruin. And I won't say most, I will say damn near all of us. I've yet to meet an entrepreneur who didn't have their mental obstacles being their largest one. And you got to overcome those mental obstacles. And the way I overcame it is I realized that if I never quit, I would never fail. So I had this big Herculean task ahead of me that I didn't know. I didn't even know where the finish line was. It was a marathon and I didn't know where I was going. But I realized that if it just kept on moving forward, at some point, the trail would lead me to the finish line as long as I didn't quit. And I had small kids and I had personal motivations that really kept me on track. And again, the big thing for me was I couldn't quit. I couldn't quit because I had kids, and be letting my children down if I quit because I wouldn't be able to provide for them the way I wanted to. So quitting was not an option. So I discovered this chart that if you put just 1% of effort above and beyond what you're doing towards your goal of launching a company, it's just doing your day job right now to keep everything afloat. But if you just commit 1% more effort every single day to launching a company, look how far you go. You go from having, if you just did one, it would equal one to 365 is one. But just with 1% more effort every single day, you are making, no kidding, real progress.
Because it's compounding, right?
It is compounding. Yes. Now, 2% increase in effort will result in 1,377.4. Think about that. Just that little bit of consistent effort where you're working for yourself. Everybody works 100% towards your employer and somebody else's dreams. If you just work 1 to 2% more for yourself, look what you can do. Look how much progress you can make. So that's the game. Now, you brought this up, Jonathan, and I wanted to address it. It seems really intimidating. It doesn't have to be. That first step, nobody knows what the hell they're doing. And I'll say this, hopefully this makes you feel better if you're considering launching a company sooner rather than later. Nobody knows how to launch their first company, not a single person. So that makes now the best time in the world to do it. It's not going to be any better or worse than you waiting 6 months or 6 years to do it. You'll never know enough to launch your first business. You'll never know it. So that should give you every single reason in the world to just do it, because there's no additional value in waiting.
You might be a chance to you mentioned barriers to entry, and I'm sure you'll
Yeah.
speak to that later on. But that's what you're describing right here, like that. Like people don't take that first step towards success or retirement, or most people don't cross that because it's scary, because it's too intimidating. Which is the point of the essence of this slide, right? To emphasize that.
Absolutely. I'll give you another example. There's 140,000 small businesses who are registered to do work with the federal government. 140,000. When I bid on my very first prime contract, there were only 7 of us who bid. Now, it was a $15 million prime contract. So of those 140,000 small businesses who registered, who say that it was their goal to do business with the federal government, who would, and every single one of those 140,000 would have given anything to have won that first, my first $15 million prime contract. Only 7 ran in the race to win it. Only 7. So the biggest way to win is to compete, because all but 7 of the 140,000 small businesses didn't even compete for it. I think that's crazy. You eliminate 140,000 competitors just by competing, just by showing up. It's the easiest thing in the world to do, but yet it's the one that holds people up from being.
That's what webinar series is touching. It's touching that, or it's poking.
Oh,
it's
absolutely.
Get in the
ring, because if you get in the ring, you have a 1 in 7 chance of winning. If you don't get in the ring, you have a 0% chance. You're just one of the 140,000 spectators dreaming about success. So, but you don't have to start out big. This right here was my first company's office for over 4 years. Now, again, I screwed things up left and right. To do it now, I could accelerate this thing. I wasted 8 years trying to figure out how to be successful. Now, that's the whole reason I launched Government Contracting Academy, is to reduce that 8 years to 8 months or less. But this here was my first company's office for over 4 years, and I ultimately sold it for that company with these humble beginnings for 8 figures. This is where I wrote my very first proposal. It was in a Starbucks or my kitchen table after the kids went to bed, and won me a $15 million prime contract, which I kept over a 33% profit margin and netted over $5 million in profit. That was just my first one. My first company won nearly $400 million in prime contracts before I sold it. But that first $15 million one, that was the game changer. And that helped me in a lot of different ways. So
so you would agree you didn't stick this with any magic dust or any secret advantage? Nope, just a normal guy jumping into the ring.
Just a normal guy doing this. And like I said, whenever I learned something, whenever I researched something, I put it in my accordion folder right here. I dragged it to Starbucks with me. I dragged it to the library, dragged it to my kitchen table, wherever. I dragged it to. Sometimes I'd go to work hours early, and I'd work on for a couple hours before I worked 8 hours for somebody else's dream. And so I kept on doing that day after day after day. And again, stupidly, I didn't know what I was doing. And I stepped on every single landmine you could possibly step on in the entrepreneurial minefield. So, I did it the hard way. Cleared that minefield by stepping on all the mines. And that's not the way you want to do it. You want to avoid them. But the deal is you got to get started. And nothing ever happens unless you have now you have a dream, but that dream becomes a goal if you write it down. So write it down, and you got to think about it. And I call it dreaming with consequences. Think about what all that can happen if you accomplish that dream. And now think about what everybody's missing out if you don't. And that was the big motivator. Is I had to make, this wasn't just a dream where if I wanted, that'd be great. Just like playing the lottery. If I didn't launch a successful business, my children would suffer from it. They wouldn't have the opportunities that they would have if I was successful as a business owner. That's a fact. And I thought, is my laziness, are my fears going to keep my children from having what I wanted them to have? And so that was my motivation going forward, is I really wanted to do that. So I wrote down goals. My wife gave me a paperweight, and I have it somewhere. Let's see if I still have it right here. You can see it behind me. Like, what would you do if you would not fail? That's a hell of a statement.
Yes, sir.
That's a hell of a question. That's a hell of a question. What would you do if you knew you would not fail? Because what that does is it takes fear out of the equation. Fear is what keeps us in our dreams. So if you take fear out of that, you think, well, what would you do? Well, hell, I'd launch a company. I would do it now. Like, yeah, but you're not doing it now. So you got to take that question out of the equation. The next thing, titled Good Enough to Launch Your Company, it's a book that I wrote, and it covers the material that we get through today. But I keep on getting sidetracked. Yeah, no, but it covers business. What it also does is it also covers the biggest obstacle you're going to have to launching your company, and that's the mental obstacle. You got to overcome that. You are good enough to do it, because I'm not going to. Some of y'all may know him, but I know of him, and he was being kind of. I used to work with. He was being very critical of this one small business owner thing. Like, man, what an idiot she. And I looked at him. I say, you and your Ivy League education, I said, are watching a person who's out there getting into their luxury SUV, their multi-million-dollar house is what you're doing. Her and her capabilities are because she's doing it and you're not. She doesn't have your education. She doesn't have your capabilities, but she's got the drive. She's got the belief that she can do it. And she's the one who's being successful. You're the one opening the door for her, because she's a teaming partner, employee. I wouldn't be so, she's getting it done. The reality is it doesn't take that. I'm not the most capable person out on the street. I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed, but I've had some success, in the federal government contracting, because it's not really about, those things. Yeah, if you really do your hard work and your grit, all that kind of stuff, you're going to be successful. What it really comes down to is are you brave enough to, are you in the arena? Now, once you step into that arena, here, let me kind of get through some of the things I need to talk through, let's talk about that again. Let's get in this strategy. So your business, you're looking for, so you need to follow a business model. They're the same thing. I use the DADDY framework, which we're going to discuss here in just a second. And you also need a decision book. Whenever you make a decision, you write it down in the book. The last thing that you have is time to go back and remake the same decision over and over and over and over and over. Once you make a decision, boom, you document it. Now you have a starting point. The expectation is you're going to use it when you learn more, that you're going to go revisit that decision and see whether or not it was the best one, and can you modify it, and should you modify it? That's the iterative should have. But unless you document something, you don't have a starting point. So you need to have what I call a decision book. So this right here is the DADDY framework. This is what I used. You can use any business model that you want or framework, just as long as it's structured and you commit to it. So this is something that I kind of created back in the day. I was in the Navy, and it's a modified systems engineering one, but I twisted it around a little bit for entrepreneurship. Dream, analyze, define, develop, execute, and evaluate. Dream. Nothing happens until you have a dream. Now that dream becomes a goal, but in order to be able to come up with a goal, you got to analyze it to see what's the realm of possibility. You've got to figure out, what industry you're getting into. You analyze everything. And people always ask me, they say, well, Randy, what should we analyze? I say, I kind of tell people that they should rights kind of approach. You want to, what are resources? What are the requirements to launch a legal company in this industry? How much spending is, and who are the big time players? Who are people that I emulate, or I can, use as a just come up with questions. Now I got a 4 perspective analysis, so I'm going to get you started, with that. Then you got your horizontal and vertical target markets, and you develop a plan for market penetration and radiation, then you execute it. And then you're constantly evaluating it. So that's the big thing that you do. But it all starts with a dream. You got to take your dream and you got to translate that into a personal goal. For example, my son, he was thinking of a small business in the federal government contracting industry. So we kind of walked through this process together. to be financially independent before he turned 30 years old. This is when he graduated from college. So he's 22 and a half years old. So we had to translate something that was tangible, that you could put a number to. Well, having a $10 million portfolio within 7.5 years of graduating from college is what that meant to him. So $10 million in investments after taxes, and in 7.5 years. So we had to identify target markets, decide how we were going to compete, and then create a compliant company. But before we got to that, these are the four market analysis drivers, that's going to help you determine those. First one is your personal goal. That drives everything. Second one is market demand. Who's buying it and for how much? Next thing is competition. How can you compete? And then finally, your capabilities. Everybody gets this wrong. Everybody thinks it's like, well, I don't know how to do, so why should I ever do a company? Well, the deal is you don't need to know how to do that. When you launch a business, whatever you were good at previously, let's say you were a plumber. If you want to launch a plumbing company and you're a good plumber, well, that kind of sucks for you if you like being a plumber, because that's no longer your job. You're no longer a plumber, you're a CEO. Now you got to think like, well, I got to manage employees, I got to provide infrastructure, I got to do sales and business development and growth and all those different things. So, that's your new job. So whatever you got is really way less important, because I won over $2 billion in federal government contracts. And what I'm about ready to say really surprises a lot of people. 80% of those awarded contracts, I didn't even know what the hell we're doing. Now, people always call me out on that and say, Randy, that can't be right. If you led them and you won the contract, man, you must be an expert at it. No. You know what I was an expert at? Creating winning proposals, demonstrating understanding of the organization's culture, of their requirements, of the customer needs, of their source material, of how to partner with really good companies to that service. I learned my capabilities aligned about how to write winning, how to do whatever it is that was in the contract. I teamed for that. We hired people that should never define exclusively your company. So to go through here, what are your personal goals and why is it important? Well, it all depends on what your goals are. For example, if you want to cross the street, the best strategy to cross the street or solution to do that is to walk. Now, if you've got a personal goal to go across your neighborhood, maybe the best strategy is to get a bike and bike there. If you want to go across town as your personal goal, then you get a car. If you want to go across country, the best strategy is to fly in a plane. If you want to fly across the solar system and go to Mars, well, you get in a spaceship. Now, just because the spaceship can take you the furthest doesn't mean that's the best strategy. In fact, it is the absolute worst for all these other personal goals that you could have had. Why? Because the probability of launching off and launching in a spaceship and going to exactly where you want to be is ridiculously low. So when I tell you that you've got to determine what your personal goals are, your personal goal should align with what you're willing to accept, what you want to obtain from your first or from this specific business pursuit. That's what a personal goal is. Now, everybody wants to become a billionaire, but if you list that as your personal goal, then you're going to be using a strategy to become a billionaire, which is the absolute worst thing that you'd ever want to do if you want to make $350,000 a year and work for yourself. If you want to make $350,000 and work, I'm going to tell you become a 1099 employee. If you want to make $500,000 a year, I tell you to focus exclusively on subcontracting, where you are embedded with your bid, with your contract team. I want to tell you to, expand your subcontracting. If you want to become a DECA millionaire, I'm going to tell you to go after prime contracts. Now, if you want to create no kidding wealth, then what you're really doing is you're committing to what I call an equity strategy. So equity strategy is basically where you're creating value in your company, ultimately to sell. So, I kind of just discussed, the associated with having some of here, I'm talking about each one of this, the equity versus income strategies. Now, here's what you need to do now. Once you've already figured out what your personal goals are, now you got to figure out who's buying what. That's easy to do. There's a ton of websites that will tell you what is buying what, and they buy NAICS codes. NAICS codes are like the Dewey Decimal System of different types of activities. So you got to get really deep into NAICS codes, and you got to learn that language. That's a quick Google. It's like, just Google NAICS code, NAICS, and that's how the government talks about different types of work. They will release a request for proposal that's under a specific NAICS code, so you kind of know what the big ticket item at.
To the formula stuff that we were talking about earlier, this is unique to government contracting where it's all visible. It's very low opinion.
Oh, absolutely. You know exactly what agency is spending for what NAICS. You just got to know exactly where they are. Now, the other thing, competition. Now, I'm going to say competition from two different standpoints. One is I want to talk about you want to find companies that are doing what it is that you want to do, who are very, very, very successful at it, and see how they're and copy them. You don't get any extra credit for being innovative. Hey, if company A is doing something and it's really, really, really working for them, follow company A, see what they're doing, better than they are. So, like I said, there's lots of different kinds of companies. What I would do is I would go to find the most successful companies in your industry. And for me, that was, back in the day, it was Oasis. Contract awardees were what I consider best. And then here's your capabilities. Again, if you're doing something that you can at least talk the language in, it's going to make things a little bit easier. But at the end of the day, it's nowhere nearly as important as what you think it is. So ideally, what you want to do is you want to find the intersection of all of these. You want to find markets that align with your personal goals, your capabilities, market demand, and your competition. And this right here is what it should look like. Now, this is what it really looks like. Let me see if I can find. It's really, anyway, here it is. No, that's not it either. Well, anyway, I was going to show you a graphic where this is a little bit more to scale, but it doesn't really matter. So now the question is once you find out that intersection of these, you also want to figure out the easiest ones to compete in. Now, this is where we're bleeding over into the next week's topic, and that is give these large prime bidders a small business partner. What do they need? Well, they have to meet subcontracting goals, and 29.43, that's their total goal. For SDBs, which is small disadvantaged businesses, which are 8A company, they have a 5%. That's actually been increased for subcontractors, still 5%. Women-owned small businesses, 5%. Service-disabled, veteran-owned small businesses has been increased to 5%, instead of 3%. Then HUBZone, it's still. So what you do is you figure out the markets that have the most spending and what you want to do. DOD and HHS are, DOD is always number one, but HHS is number 3 with respect to size and their federal budget allocation. So if you look at their HUBZone goals, HHS, 1.6%. They're barely meeting half of their HUBZone goals for subcontracting. What does that mean? Well, it means that these big companies can't find enough small businesses that are HUBZones that are low risk. And that's, again, where ISO kicks in. So it's kind of holistic how that happens. And then you start looking at, NAICS codes that you may be interested in. For my son, he was very interested in technology. He has a computer science undergraduate, so anything that dealt with computers. So these were the NAICS codes that he was interested in, and 36% of their spending in HHS was in the NAICS codes that he was interested in. So, he was targeting HHS. Like I said, at the time, the second largest budget in the federal government. 36% of their spending was in his NAICS, and they were meeting half of their HUBZone goals. So that is a high level on how to.
Randy, I didn't put an end to this. Crossed an hour 30
Oh,
seconds.
so well,
30 seconds for that?
I just kind of wrapped it up where that's the quick and dirty. That's the deal. You don't have to get this right perfectly. And the reason why that is because your first market penetration is going to be a subcontract. And these large prime contract vendors, as long as you're in the ballpark, that's good enough for them. The most important thing to like a Northrop Grumman or an IBM thinking bringing you on board as their designated hub zone or designated woman-owned small business is that you're low risk.